So I'd like to start by talking about a few definitions. Let's start with learning. We're going to be talking about learning as an explicit and verifiable change in human performance. Now, in other words, what we're looking for, if learning has to occur, that there will be some sort of external capability that will in fact be observable. So in our little diagram here, it says, I couldn't juggle before, and after learning how to juggle, I can juggle. Now this might be a little bit different than the way we've thought about learning, say maybe as a purely internal mental exercise. And we're not saying that that still exists. We're going to suggest that as instructors and instructional designers, we want to figure out a way where learning can be in fact verifiable. And that would require some sort of behavior that's observable. So that's kind of what we're looking for. That for learning to have occurred, we're looking for an explicit and verifiable change. Instruction, we're going to talk about as a deliberately arranged set of external events designed to activate and aid the learning processes of a group or individual. So we have learning and we have instruction. So instruction is about a deliberately arranged set of events. Now, when we talk about activating and aiding the learning process, this could be, or I should say, it could be the classic broadcast model or dissemination model where the instructor gives information to students. That's certainly a time-honored activity for instructors. We'd like to suggest, though, that instruction goes beyond just that telling broadcast mode. That what we're really saying is that instruction is a stimulus to the learning process. Now, clearly, there are situations where a learner can learn without any instruction at all, and that's fine. And we're going to suggest that as designers and instructors, that we might actually want to promote that idea. In other words, we would like to provide a stimulus whereby the learner can then go out and learn. So as an example, perhaps you might tell a very interesting or moving story, and that story stimulates and motivates that student to do research on their own to learn. So that's what we're talking about. It's more than just the telling of information. And that leads to instructional design. So that an instructional design then is an explicit and systematic process used to create verifiable improvement in human performance, or in other words, learning. So it is intentional and that there is a system. That's kind of what we're going for in these classes. Now, one of the systems that we use is the ADDIE model, and ADDIE stands for, it's just an acronym with 5 letters to it: analyze, design, develop, implement, and evaluate. And if we think about analyze, that's just saying, what are we talking about? What does the organization need? Who are our learners? Why is this necessary? What will be different if learning has occurred? We might even ask the simple question, if this is a need of an organization, can instruction even deal with it? But at any rate, if we have finished the analysis, we get a good idea of who, what, where, when, how the instruction might take place. We can then begin to design it. And by design, we're taking into factors that we've thought about and discovered in our analysis, and we try to apply good learning principles, and we come up with a sequence of activities that we believe will lead learners to achieve the learning objectives. In other words, the things that we set out to accomplish that we've identified in our analysis, now we design the specific things that the instructor and the learners will do that will lead to achieving those learning goals. Once we develop that, and we might consider that like a design blueprint, in other words, here's the things that we want to do, we then have to develop them. And as an example, perhaps in our learning design, we say, we need to show a videotape of the correct operation of this piece of machinery. Well, now in development, we will actually have to create that video. We might have to create manuals. We might have to set up our internet files. So this is where all that things get developed. It's basically making real the design. Going further from that, then we might need to implement what we've come up with. So in our online example, we might have developed all the files and stuff, but in implementation we have to choose and arrange for an internet host to make sure that our information is available to our target audience. Lastly, we have evaluate. You notice it evaluates right in the middle. The suggestion here is, rather than think of ADDIE as purely a linear step-by-step process, in fact, the ADDIE process can be quite iterative. And evaluation is sort of the connecting point for all of this. We might do some analysis, and then we need to evaluate, are we still on the right track? And so on continuously throughout the entire ADDIE process. It's not just step by step, we go through each step, we do it carefully, and by the end we're done. More realistically, it's quite an iterative approach. You might notice here, in the model, for those of you looking through this, these are sort of indicators of examples of the kinds of documentation that might be created via the ADDIE model. We talked a little bit about the design blueprint, sort of that interface between design and development. Development will start to think about an implementation plan. We might create pilots and prototypes. We might, in fact, develop the testing through our evaluation. How well did it go? In implementation, we might include the final production masters after everything has been set up and running. And we might include follow-up and evaluation reports. And then we flow through it again, and maybe we create a new project proposal for the revisions that we need to make. The last item up here, we have two types of evaluation, or I should say two purposes for evaluation. The first here is summative evaluation, which is very simply that backward-looking approach. We set out to do some things in our objectives. Did we achieve them? So that's kind of that looking back. It's kind of like a grade. How well did we do? The second purpose is formative evaluation, which says, based on the information we got from evaluations, how can we use that to improve? So that's kind of a quick run-through of some definitions and one model for instructional design, which is ADDIE.